Hi, my name is Orlando Luz-Aguilar, and I'm going to talk about Krashen's language acquisition and language learning. It deals with 5 hypotheses, which we will see in the following slides. So, language acquisition. This is the first half of the hypothesis, and it deals with how we learn a second language and we are able to do so like we have learned our first language or our mother tongue. It is supposed to be implicit, natural, and sometimes even informal, depending on how the courses are handled. But most of all, it's subconscious. There's no hammering of grammar. There isn't supposed to be any strict rules or observation of forms. It's mainly supposed to be for us to pick up the language as any native speaker would their mother tongue. Okay, now we have language learning, which is somewhat the opposite of acquisition in a way. It is considered a conscious knowledge of a second language, and it focuses on the explicit form of learning, which means we learn the language. We are explicitly going through grammar, vocabulary, and are aware of doing so. We don't do that when you were young. For say, we don't go through flashcards in acquisition, but in language learning, it's actually most important to do that because we are conscious that we're going to learn language, the grammar, the lexical structure, etc. This method can be summed up as knowing about the language, not really acquiring it per se as we would in a natural context, more so an academic one. And here we can visibly see the differences in a sort of comparison kind of way. Acquisition is subconscious, where learning is conscious. Acquisition is subtle, and learning is more about the lessons and practice. Acquisition relies on context, while learning relies on the academic aspect of grammar and knowledge. Acquisition deals with picking up the language, whereas learning, we're just knowing about the rules. And acquisition is open for correction, whereas learning, you're becoming more automatic, as in you're getting used to the academic aspect of the language. Okay, the monitor hypothesis is something I think every language student does. It's when we call upon learned knowledge to correct ourselves, everything we've ever learned, so be it grammar, vocabulary, etc., and the knowledge of the rules, as in grammar and all that. So it's mainly just double checking of what we're doing, like taking a step back from our production and analyzing what we're doing. And there are 3 kinds. There are over monitors, those who don't trust what they've learned, so they're always going to be very hesitant and they're going to be shy, most of all. Under monitors are those who could care less about accuracy. That means they mostly care about delivering the message, not really the form or how they do it. So they do get the message across, but sometimes they make mistakes. And the optimal monitors are considered the most recommended because these kind of monitors check when necessary. They're not checking all the time, nor are they checking less than what they should be. Although it's not the most important hypothesis in Krashen's theory, it is important to mention that Acquisition of grammar structures are done in a predictable way. A student will learn some grammar aspects before others, no matter what level they are on. So it also mirrors the way native speakers learn their mother tongues. They also learn their own grammar structures at their given time. And despite the age or background, as mentioned before, the conditions, it all leads up to a lot of similarities in the academic field of students learning in these predictable orders. So this is the comprehensible input. It's considered the most important hypothesis in Krashen's theory. And it basically states that the relationship between input, which is the exposure of the language, and acquisition is important in the learner's process of language learning. And there are some factors that intervene in this. To be successful, there should be an emphasis on acquisition and not learning, basically. The obtainment of input is supposed to be slightly beyond their level. So if they are on level I, the following concept they're going to learn is 1. So it's going to be I plus 1. Fluency emerges. It isn't taught. It's going to come out eventually, and it shouldn't be pushed either. When enough comprehensible input is given, the concept of I plus 1 takes place naturally. So in language learning, and I think in most academic fields, there is a period of time called the silent period where the learner will mainly just observe the teacher, observe their companionships with their classmate, observe interaction, observe media, any kind of form of demonstration of the language. They're going to just observe, and they're not going to talk nor anything. So that's why it's called the silent period. So some may have short silent periods, or some might take a longer time. And for teaching English to young children, it's more noticeable because they're children, and it's in their nature to always be observant, always see how adults are talking, how they construct their sentences, and it shouldn't be pushed. Rather, the teacher must observe when this is happening and take advantage of it. Now, this is the last hypothesis, but it's also different yet equally important as the rest. It talks about the attitude of the learner and how their state of emotion and their self-confidence might filter out information they receive during the courses. If done right, they will easily absorb all the materials and structures and grammar. But when they're disturbed or when they're feeling down, they won't easily absorb the language per se. So this hypothesis observes how affective variables relate to the process of segment language acquisition. So we've reached the end of our presentation. I think we can conclude that Krashen's hypotheses are of major importance in the language learning academic field, and it shouldn't scare off teachers who want to try to use it, seeing as it's actually very malleable and very adaptable to the syllabus and curriculums. And the role of the teachers when providing comprehensible input for language acquisition in the classroom, it should be the main goal, really, because one doesn't survive through just grammar and hammering down on repetitive forms of media. So I think a good way to vary repetitive and routinely classrooms, and in the long run it will be for the best. The child will learn successfully and hopefully even to a native speaker's skill. I think that is all. Thanks.